All right, welcome everyone. As Luke said, I'm David Vilaverde, presenting the file listener capability added in the last week. I don't have a whole lot of slides today. I was going to do a little bit more presentation and questions, but let's just start off here. So if you were part of the session, the enablement series for R22, you may remember the event listener session, which was also presented by me. The file listener is really, or the file connector is really just an extension of that. It supports delimited and notification events, and is basically built on the existing event listener framework that we put in R22. If you're not familiar with that, I have links here on this this PowerPoint to that recording and the old presentation. I'll do a quick recap from that. Basically, the file connector is pulling a directory and broadcasting events that IPD processes can listen to and take action on. So events, quickly go through this. Events are triggers basically from external systems. We have two types of events in our system: an event source, which are messages triggered from an external system coming into ICRT, and we also have the idea of event targets, where we want to basically push an event out from our system out to something else. The file connector supports both. It can both pull a file system and look for incoming documents, as well as writing out documents in a file writer event target. All events are associated with connections, so IPD processes can listen for events from the file connector or the connection associated with the file connector. And also, this file connector supports fan out, where a single message can invoke multiple business processes, and we'll have a demo of that coming out later. So basically, there are two types of event sources in the file connector. The first one is the file monitor. That is basically not going to touch the content of the document. Basically, it's useful for when you have, like, let's say you have some transcoding application for video files or media files. In that case, you know, a process doesn't really need to parse that content. It can't. It's not, it's not a text document or an XML document or whatnot. So you just want to know that the file arrived, so you can create a business process that, may notify downstream systems, etc. The other type of event source we have is the limited content parser, and that supports flat file parsing. Does not support fixed width yet, but may in the future. And it also supports the concept of splitting records. So imagine you have a document or a file that's dropped down the file system, and it's got 1 million records in it. You may want to invoke a IPD process per record, as opposed to trying to load, a gigabyte of data into memory all at once. So it can split the records out and invoke a process per record. For event target types, there's the generic file writer, which can write any text to a file. And then we also have the delimited content writer. Again, it can support writing delimited content, CSV, tab delimited, etc., to a file, but does not yet support fixed width record flat files. And so the connector, go back to the event source. Connector supports two methods for interacting with the data. The first being custom objects. That's basically saying, hey, treat each record in this file as a process object. If you're familiar with process objects in IPD, basically it's an object that has a bunch of fields, and where each field is represented as a column in that record. The advantage with working with a document this way is that using, you can use a field picker, like I had that pictured on the right here, where you can just kind of drill into your object and say, I want the, the record's first name or last name, whatever, versus, or the XPath actually becomes quicker if you're using it in an expression. So it's a little easier to use the expression to access the data. The other built-in object type, are built-in objects where if you don't know what columns are on your inbound file, or the columns may change frequently, or you're just going to have a generic catch-all, hey, I'm looking for any CSV file and I don't know what's in there. You can use this method for working with the data. So the downside, though, is that it's not so easy to grab a record by name, for example. So if you wanted to do the equivalent of drilling into the first name, you would have to do, some X query that sort of looked like this, where you're kind of like looking up the name index and then going to that record and finding that field with that index. So it's a little trickier to work with, but it's more flexible in that you don't need to know about the data ahead of time. And so the other things to remember before we get into a demo, and maybe I'll take questions before a demo too, just to make sure everyone kind of understands, but the file connector currently only runs on an agent, which makes sense because you can't really place flat files on our cloud servers. That also means that your event sources, any processes using the event source, must run on the secure agent that's running the file connector or that's pulling to that directory, a directory. And finally, processes that are only using event targets can run anywhere. So that means if you wanted to write to a file on your agent, that process on the cloud can actually write records to a flat file sitting on some machine, behind your firewall. And so before we get to the demo, any quick questions?
Hey, I have a quick question. You mentioned
Sure.
this thing called fan out. What does fan out mean?
So basically, it means you have one message coming in. Let's say you want to be notified when some media file arrives on the file system. And basically, any process that's interested in that, any person who's developing an IPD process can listen on that. And we'll deliver that notification event to all interested processes, right? So message, basically a pub sub type of idea where you have, one message in and then 20 consumers of that message. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen here. So I have this file connection simply created by, going in here and saying new connection. There should all be everyone should have now a file option in here. Name is required. Must run on an agent. Once you do that, you'll be able to add a monitor or a delimited. In the case that I have here, I'm going to be adding I'm going to be showing you the file monitor for this first demo. So I have a file monitor here. I have two event sources. Just go to that one. So basically, I'm pulling this directory here. You have certain options here, which are sort of documented here, but we'll have more documentation on our help site. Basically, if you want to, recurse into the directories, you may include filters here that include or exclude certain files. You could do certain things like after you receive after you handle the message, you may want to delete the file, or you might want to move it into a different directory, so you don't process it again. By default, we use a registry, so anytime a file arrives, if you don't move it, we'll kind of just log it to another directory saying, okay, we moved this file already, we processed this file already, so don't process it again. And then some polling intervals, how often you might want to poll and such. So,
hey, David, one quick question. So the include exclude, are you able to use like wildcard, like star.txt, and could it process
an
like
example? So this is like a regular expression, so you might have to use something like star.txt, because the dot is a special character in regular expressions. So, if you want to, just include text files, you would do something like this. Right, so once we do that, so there's this new files logger. So Michaela helped me with this. He's having connectivity problems, but he helped me with some of his demo stuff. Basically, we're going to pull, we're pulling for this directory, and we just kind of want to log using, in this demo, we're using the file writer. So we're using both the event source and an event target in this case here, the file log writer. And again, we're writing out to this directory here. And we're just using append mode, so you can override the file, append to it, move the file if it's already there. There's a few options on how to handle files that are already there. Some deletion, prefixes. There's a lot of stuff here. I'm not going to set it all, go through it all, but there's a little bit of documentation to explain what all that does. So basically, it's a receive file. So again, from the ARC22 enablement session, the event listeners, and we're saying, okay, when this process should be started by listening on this file connection monitor here. So anytime we have a connection for the file source monitor, invoke this process, do some assignments here. We have data about those records. So we have like the file name, length, relative path. I can show you some of that stuff here under metadata. So we have the directory it exists in, the extension, full name, last modified, size, etc. And then we'll just log it. So that's kind of virtual machine have to log in here. So we'll say move this movie file to the directory that's being pulled. And go back here. Just have to switch to my agent here, and you can see that let's see here. If you remember, I said that if you put the same file in the directory and it's been already processed, it won't process it again. So during testing, during the testing of my demo yesterday, I put the file in there, and I forgot to clean out the repository that tracks what files have been already processed. So all I had to do was move it to a different file name here, video1.move. That triggers a new file. And now you can see that the process is moved. So let me just show you in case you're debugging how where that lives. So basically, you'll see this .ae data. If you look in here, there's a file in here, so I can do more. And you'll see here it processes video, and there's video one. So that's how it's just keeping track of. And it uses the key is basically like the file size, the timestamp. So in this case, it processed it twice because the timestamps were different. So.
Okay.
But if
that's important because if there's a reason that it was sent twice, if the size were different or the timestamp were different, it would still process it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
awesome.
Not just the file name; it's a little bit more information. And so you can see now here it invoked the process. Then I should have written out to this file log writer, and let's go into the detail mode here real quick. The file log writer. If we look at, let's see here. So basically, I wrote to a place called log.txt, and we kind of have to go back to the file connection to see where my writer is pointing. It's pointing at file storage. So let's do that again. So we handle the video one. So basically, this is just writing any content out, so we can see that we're keeping track of all the files that were received. We talked about fan out a little bit earlier. So if I wanted to have, if other people were interested in this, all they'd have to do is say new process. I am interested in, start via event. File source monitor. We'll leave it empty. It doesn't have to do anything exciting for now, but we publish that. Oh, I made a mistake here. You might want to make sure that these are running on the the same location as the connection. And so if I go back here, and I move that same console. I invoke the second one and this second listener as well. Right? So now everybody who's interested in listening can receive those events. And quick look at that input. I don't have logging enabled for that one, verbose logging, I should say. All right. So you can see here that this is the information that you'll have available to you. You know, the name of the file, the extension, size, the path where it currently lives on the agent, directory, and a modified time. All right, that's that first demo. Here.
Pretty cool.
So then the next demo we're going to do is delimited content. Again, look at the connection here. We'll now go to this delimited content writer. The delimited content parser here. So I'm now parsing, listening on this new directory, new user source. I'm listening for, you asked about this earlier, CSV files. In this case, I'm going to move the file to the done directory, and if it fails, I'll move it to the error directory. My delimiter is a comma. Text is quoted. If you have a header, you might want to ignore the first record. And then if you have a large document, you want to split the rows, and that'll do one per. And then using built-in process objects. This is that where I mentioned before, you can either use the built-in types, which are like generic, but if you actually know the data that's in your thing, you might want to just use this commented delimited list to build out basically the header from that file. You do that, and when you publish this connection, you'll have a new object created, and you can see here all the fields from that file are now called out as properties on the object. And that's important because when you're using that object, like I said, come in here and you might want to, access that object. You'll be able to just drill into it for each record. Okay. In addition, this particular demo is going to use the delimited content writer. And so if the premise for this demo is, I have a file and it receives, that contains all the users across the world, and I want to create two files, one for all the U.S. users and one for all the foreign or users abroad. And so basically, there's an assignment here that sort of sorts the users into two categories, U.S. and abroad users, and then we'll write them out. You'll see two write steps here, right here, and I'll end up with two files. So let's just put a file in that log directory here. Hold on a second. Let's do this. And I'll learn my lesson, and I'll just rename this file. And let's see if that demo can be a little easier for me. Yep, all right, so again, oh, there it is. So it's currently running. I can figure out what it's doing. You can see here in this particular case, I have my input object. I have a record. I have all my records in my source file. I have a total record count in case you're interested. This is also useful because if you split the files, you'll still have the total record count, but you'll only have one record, so you can kind of tell if you're, how far you are into a file, because each record has an index, I believe, right? So you can kind of tell, if you're doing some split processing, you might want to say, okay, when I get to the end record, do something. And then you also have the initial content, right? The initial information about that file. That's the new one I had created. In this particular file, I had it run a cloud task. So, basically, you can see that this task just ran. And what the file was doing is, split the files into two, right? And then after you're done splitting the files, run a cloud task to process those records that, in the just the U.S. users. So I had the ICS task basically take the user that was in Dallas and put it into the process directory. So it was a simple task. So I wanted to grab the Dallas user. And so Bill White here from Dallas is now processed here. And you can see I put in the current timestamp. So when I pulled them out of that other record and put them in here. So basically the ICS task ran. I split the file. I ran an ICS task on the split file and kind of string together some sort of process that uses more than just, the RT componentry. And then I had one more quick one. It was just basically on errors. If there's an error in your document, in this case, here, I have this bad document that has more columns defined than the data received. So let's see. If we go here. So nothing happened. There's no processing. But if you look at your agent log, and we have to do a better job, honestly, about handling this. Why doesn't you'll get an error like this? So it'll say, it wanted 10, but only got 9 columns. So basically, there was an extra column in the header, and then the rows didn't reflect that. So, but the data does go to the errors directory. So if I go to you'll see the bad CSV is right there. So the data is not lost. It just moved it, and then you can fix it and just resubmit it and move it back to source directory. And I think that's a big demo. I'll just open it up to any more questions.